Two big developments today on the whole issue of foreign interference in Canada. Police made arrests in the killing of BC Sikh activist Hardeep Singh Nijjar. And Commissioner Marie-Josée Hogue delivered her first report on foreign interference in elections. And that was just today. Earlier this week, a lot of politics. House Speaker Greg Fergus kicked Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre out of question period. It was over a particularly nasty and tense exchange with the Prime Minister on BC's drug decriminalization policy. All of this quicken the political pulse this week, and we're going to talk about that with our party insiders. Greg McEachern is a former Liberal ministerial staffer. Melanie Richet is a former communications director for the NDP, and Fred Delory is a former Conservative campaign manager. Okay, first, I want to get a quick take on what we learned from the arrests today. I mean, not sort of the granular, charges and stuff, but Greg, India has been a simmering issue for ever since the Prime Minister went to the G20. What did you make on what we saw today?
I think principles always need to triumph politics. One of the first panels we did, Mel noted that at the time, this was in September, that there had been a cooling of our relationship with India, and there were Canadian politicians that were siding with India over Canada. And within a couple of days, the reason for this chill became apparent, and the Prime Minister rose and told us what the allegations were. Yeah. Since that time, allegations have turned into charges, and not just in our country that this is evidence has come forward. So I know it's sport to kick politicians when they're down, when they've got bad polling, but I don't want to also sound like a rah-rah patriot. But for me, Canada should come first. And I think there should be a lesson there about taking a deep breath and not always trying to politicize something until you have all the facts. I know that sounds a little bit Pollyannish, but as the time has gone on, this has been a hugely, I can't imagine this. Another country came to our country and killed a Canadian citizen.
Allegedly, yes.
Allegedly.
Yes.
And I think there's a lot of people that need to kind of take stock of that.
No, Mel, there was a lot of commentary about what happened at the G20, criticizing the Prime Minister for messing up relations with India, and then even some hot takes, I would call them, when he made the allegation in the House of Commons that it was a distraction, as if accusing a foreign government of murder would be a topic changer. And here we are today. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, and let's remember the big point here is a Canadian was killed on Canadian soil by allegedly by a foreign government. So that is a really serious allegation that, to your point, regardless of what your political stripe is, whatever there are plenty of things to criticize the Prime Minister and to criticize the Liberal government on. This, at the time, felt not statesmanlike. It did not feel dignified for somebody who's looking for a position to be Prime Minister. And since then, we've seen a lot of those details come out, proving to the point of why the Prime Minister needed to do this in the first place. So I agree with you, Greg. I think it's a good reminder of when these things come out. Again, a Canadian killed on Canadian soil, and an issue that we've been hearing from Sikh Canadians for years about how they feel targeted by the Indian government. And what we saw play out, the criticism, the critics taking shots at the Prime Minister over this, I think not only was it not statesmanlike, but it only said to those community members, to those Sikh Canadians who've been worried about this for a while, that they weren't taking it seriously either. So I think that's another important point to raise.
Yeah, and while you're criticizing politicians for it, I was thinking more some of the columnists in my line of work, big, bold takes on this issue, which have not aged particularly well. What are your thoughts on the arrest today?
Well, I think it goes back to when we go to the fall, where the Prime Minister did say the right things at the time. Looking back on it now, we can say that. And he handled it the right way, in the appropriate way. It's absolutely mind-boggling that this happened, that a foreign country may have sent a hit squad to kill a Canadian citizen. And the Prime Minister and this government needs to find a way to deal with this. Obviously, there's the justice system, that is the way, but this is international affairs we're talking about. I don't even know how you prosecute going to other countries if there's actually ties found to that. But it's absolutely appalling. And again, as a Canadian, we stand with our Prime Minister and our government to get to the bottom of this.
Yeah, and it's not just Canada. I'm telling you, this unsealed indictment from the U.S. on the arrest of Nikhil Gupta it's like a movie plot. Less movie plottish, Mel, today was the release of Justice Hogue's report on the first report on the public inquiry into foreign interference. broadly concludes the same thing David Johnston concluded, that the elections were fair, even though there was interference, though she does get more granular in some specific ridings. What was your takeaway from this today?
Yeah, I think it was good news to see that, the election was fair. I think that reassures a lot of people who were looking for that in this report. I do want to say, though, I think what we saw in the report is that this current government, previous governments have failed to really make sure that the proper safeguards are in place. And I would say now that we have this report, it's maybe a little bit too close to the next election to continue to put those safeguards in place, but we need to reassure Canadians and we need to make sure that our process is transparent so folks feel like our electoral system is secure and safe from any potential for interference. It's great that our election was safeguarded by that, or the result was safeguarded by that, but the fact that interference is still possible, I think, is something that worries a lot of people, and our government needs to now move forward and figure out what comes next to make sure that people can be reassured that we don't have foreign interference going forward.
Well, Fred, as the person who ran the Conservative campaign in 2021, which was part of this assessment, what did you make of the conclusions and the other findings from Justice Hogue today?
You said it came out today. I thought I read it last year when David Johnson put the same report in. I don't know why we went down this road again to do the same thing, to find the same conclusions. We have a problem here where institutions are not talking to each other well and communicating. That's the solution where we need to figure it out. It's right in front of us.
She makes that point repeatedly.
And and it's the same point that I made last year. And it's the absolute solution. I wish parliamentarians would get together and actually work together. And I know that's an impossible dream, but figure out where the holes exactly are, plug them, and let's go. We're going to an election in a year's time, and I don't know if we'll be anywhere ahead when we get there.
Greg, what are your thoughts on this? I know there were some questions raised about the Don Valley North nomination. I'd raised this in previous shows that the Liberal nomination rules of letting non-citizen, non-permanent residents vote, she targets this in the report as a gateway for foreign interference, potentially. Not just this nomination, but all nominations.
Yeah, and I mean, I would rather have a bigger conversation about nominations, because there's been some dicey stuff, and it's not just necessarily about
100%.
Non-Canadians. Two big takeaways for me is there were a lot of leaks. This was driven by media leaks. We still don't know how accurate those leaks were. And I find that really troubling. And I have to say, I've been a political communicator for 25 years, and I'm in the post-Watergate era. I have a lot of respect for journalism, and I know it's a shrinking field right now. But in the U.S., we have organizations like Media Matters. CNN used to have reliable sources. But I do think trust is important for all institutions, including the media. So I do think somehow Canadian media do have to have some sort of conversation about how they drove this and what are the results. The other part I was watching for very carefully is Erin O'Toole said that up to 9 ridings could have been affected by this. And if you look on page 144, the Justice says, I'm aware of these suggestions that multiple ridings were affected in 2021. I do not have any evidence to confirm that, I believe is the wording she uses. So I think that I'm going to take some solace in that. But, Fred's right. Fred had this position to be absolutely fair, but also the things I heard today, I'm hearing people say that David Johnston is vindicated, and I believe he is.
Yeah, it's interesting, just Mel, to give you the last word on it, up to 9 ridings, Mr. O'Toole, he didn't say conclusively and emphatically it was, he said potentially. But Justice Hogue kind of narrows it down to maybe can he choose riding, and there's something with the nomination in Don Valley North, but it speaks to the challenge of saying anything definitively and conclusively when it comes to this without clear, hard evidence, which doesn't appear to be there at the level she needed.
Right, and I think maybe to a little bit of your point, but also reflecting on maybe what we heard from Erin O'Toole and others really since the last election is when we report on these things, when we say these things, I think maybe a little bit of care or extra care is needed to make sure that we get it right and to make sure that we are not raising alarm bells with folks who are already maybe looking for those alarm bells. I think following, everything we saw following the last U.S. election, people are maybe more willing to believe that our elections are somehow rigged. So the discourse as elected officials, I think, needs to be maybe a little bit higher and a little bit more careful before we weigh into those matters.
Yeah, journalists have to be very careful how we report on this, how we talk on this, how we weigh in on this, but then how people cherry pick specific elements from the reporting and take it out of context. It's there's enough challenges with media and trust in institutions without deliberately making it worse, as some people might want to do. Okay, we're going to get to Greg and Fred are on the opposite side of an issue here this week, so I want to get to this. We're going to pivot away from the foreign interference stuff and talk about all the domestic, what we call it, the wacko drama we saw this week. Greg, you wanted to talk about what happened in
Can you say that on CBC?
Yes, we can. Well, I'm not in Parliament. I can say what I want.
I think after last week,
I didn't call anyone. I didn't call a person wacko, Fred. That's the standard. But what do you make of this whole week? The saw Pierre Poilievre get thrown out, and the drama and the dramatic change in tone from one day to the next in Parliament.
I'll cut to the chase. If he didn't do something wrong when he got kicked out, why did he change his behavior so dramatically the next day? It was like everyone in the House of Commons got hit with a tranquilizer dart, and it was a much calmer and maybe more business got done. But, this followed. Last Friday we were talking about his stop at the border protest and some individuals that seem to support some pretty nasty folks in Canada. And I don't know if he was trying to pivot off that, but I'm so tired of everything being put through the lens that this must be some sort of genius behind it, when a lot of people will say, who know the Conservative leader, is that he can't help himself. He really enjoys this. And it wasn't the word. It was what the Speaker asked him to do.
Yeah, he refused to withdraw it.
And he's sitting next to Andrew Scheer, a former Speaker, who was well known for, drawing the line about respect for the chair, respect for the Speaker. But that's why he was asked to leave. And I kind of find it funny, like the entire caucus left with him. They're elected to sit there and represent Canadians. And then the next day we had a whole 180. If you really need to raise more money, I thought you were doing really great. You really need to, you're 21 points ahead. Why are you behaving like this? And it's a time of, the NHL where people blame the ref, but the ref in this case is the Speaker, and I do think the Speaker needs to be respected.
So, Fred, I don't know if there was a strategy there, or if just Mr. Poilievre got up and hit the Prime Minister, the Prime Minister hit back hard, and two guys not looking to back down. It escalated, and then I don't know if he felt maybe Fergus didn't have the guts to kick him out or what. But what's your read on how it all went down on Tuesday?
I don't know if there was a strategy per se put together, but it certainly could have been. And if there was, it worked well, because he drew attention to this issue and really blew it up, and got national media on this, covering it. And the way he went after...
On which issue, the Speaker or the drug decriminalization?
On the drug decriminalization.
The fact that David has to ask that question...
No, it's I just wanted to make sure people knew what he was talking about.
Yeah, but it kind of suggests that I'm not sure that issue...
No, but even the issue being thrown out for saying wacko or extremist or putting all these things, we kept seeing the clips over and over to push that message out. So there are two sides of it. There's the issue and then fighting against the Prime Minister. And there's already been a lot of shots on the Speaker for being a partisan Speaker. The Conservative Party and the Bloc Québécois have tried to remove him as a partisan Speaker for some time now. So this is a consistent message as well. So for them to not stand down when he asks them to, I think does play to a larger strategy. And to your point about the next day where it was more muted, I think that was a strategy as well. I actually watched Question Period Wednesday. I actually went out and saw it watched it live, something I never do. And watching this and seeing how he performed, where he did look like a statesman, he looked like a very concerned person, Poilievre did, on this issue. And he went and he asked these questions in a very good tone, because people were watching that. And I think the Liberals were expecting a fight. This is Wednesday. Wednesday is caucus day. It's usually the scrappiest day in the House, and it wasn't. I don't think it was that they felt they had to pull back. I think they felt this was a part of the plan.
Yeah, not watching Question Period has me reconsidering your participation in this panel. I was going to let you know. But Mel, that's
I watch the clips on social media.
Just like everybody else. Mel, what do you think of this? I mean, the Liberals I spoke with felt that he showed who he was, and that's what they want. But, as Fred says, he got a lot of attention for an issue he's trying to pin on the Prime Minister, and then changed tack the next day. Where do you see it?
Right. I agree maybe a little bit with both of you. And I don't know that Pierre Poilievre did what maybe he was intending to do, maybe he wasn't intending to do, but bring issue to the toxic drug crisis in BC, or if he did bring attention to it, I don't think he showed people who care about this issue that he was treating it with the care that it requires. think it's something like 20 people a day die in BC in the toxic drug crisis. And if that is something that I really care about, and I saw the hysterics in the House this week, I don't know that I would think that this is somebody who can handle this as Prime Minister the way that it needs to be handled. I would say too, I do agree with you though, that the issues with the Speaker, this has been something that has kind of plagued Speaker Fergus from the beginning. Folks thought he was maybe a little bit too close to the Prime Minister when he put his name forward to become Speaker, and through what we saw supporting the Liberal, the Ontario Liberals, I believe it was, video.
Recording the video
Yeah,
and
exactly.
these sorts of things.
Just like a few little things, yeah. And to be fair to Speaker Fergus, he came into this role and temperature was already hot, so I think it just continues to get hotter. But again, I'm just gonna take a step back. Obviously, I'm partisan. I have a partisan circle, but I also have a very non-political circle. And those folks, when they saw this week, did not feel like this was somebody that they could see as Prime Minister. I think they saw somebody who they've come to expect to call people names, to take shots when that doesn't really require it. And if, Pierre Poilievre, we saw the ads that they've spent millions of dollars on to make him seem softer. I don't think that that's the same guy. So I think he needs to kind of pick who he's going to be, because I think that did not turn anybody who is looking for somebody to be a little bit more statesmanlike his way this week.
So I'm trying to use Mel as a voice of reason, so I'll let you and Fred fight it out again. Go ahead.
I would like to comment on the Speaker. I want to remind people that Chris D'Entremont, who's the Conservative Deputy Speaker, he's the Deputy Speaker who happens to be a Conservative MP, was probably well placed to take over. And he was challenged by the Conservative caucus in the House very dramatically. And a lot of MPs felt that they weren't going to support him. The other thing, when Speaker Rhoda, following the introduction in the gallery, when people called for his resignation, I believe the two parties that were the last to get there were the Conservatives and the Bloc. And they are the first two parties that have been calling for Greg Fergus's head since the get-go. People can read whatever they want into that, but I find the introduction much more serious than someone in their speaker's robe doing a video that they apologize for, when it appears, I think that Andrew Scheer had done similar things when he was speaker, if I recall correctly.
I'm not 100% sure. He may. I don't want to slander Mr. Scheer because I can't. I can't corroborate your claim there, Greg. I don't know. But Fred, we got about 40 seconds. The refusal to withdraw, calling the Prime Minister wacko 3-4 times. Did the Speaker have a choice? Like, we had Peter Julian on that day, said, the Speaker did the right thing. I said, well, Jagmeet Singh got kicked out. He goes, yeah, did the right thing. We took our medicine. I mean, did the Speaker have a choice?
He didn't have a choice. No, he didn't, absolutely. And I think Poilievre was happy with that as well. I think it was set up that way in terms of, the words he was using. At the end of the day, 1977, we introduced cameras to the House of Commons, and it became performance arts then. Social media is just exploding that now. It is all, there's no debate that actually happens in this place. This is all about pushing your messages, and that's what they're doing.
Well, thank God the cameras in this studio have not turned this into performance. I actually think this was a fun discussion. I want to thank you all for coming in. Greg McEachern, Melanie Richer, Fred Delory, thanks so much, gang.